They mocked Earth's weak males. Now all 5 alien princesses are pregnant with my seed. The mockery. The crystalline halls of the galactic Concord gleamed with light from 1,000 worlds, but Captain Marcus Reed felt only the weight of countless hostile stares. He stood alone on the presentation platform, Earth's lone representative before the assembled powers of the known galaxy. This. The voice rang out like shattered glass. High Sovereign Lioness of the Viridian Empire rose from her throne, her silver robes flowing around her tall, elegant frame. This is what the primitive world of Earth sends us. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though his jaw tightened imperceptibly. He'd faced combat situations with better odds than this diplomatic minefield. Beside Lioness, her 4 sister sovereigns watched with varying degrees of amusement. Sarah, the military commander, smirked openly. Thessa, their chief scientist, studied him like a disappointing experiment. Myra, the youngest, seemed almost apologetic, while Kestra, the diplomat, maintained an ice-cold smile. Your species lives barely a century, Lioness continued, descending the steps with predatory grace. You have no telepathic abilities, no natural armor, no enhanced strength. You've only just discovered faster-than-light travel. Tell me, Captain Reed, why should the Concord acknowledge your application for membership? Marcus had prepared for this moment for months. He'd studied their cultures, their histories, their prejudices. Now, standing in the center of their contempt, he drew upon every ounce of his training. Because underestimating humans, he said calmly, meeting Lioness's violet eyes without flinching, has proven costly for every species that's made that mistake. The chamber fell silent. Sarah leaned forward, suddenly interested. Lioness's smile sharpened. Bold words. Perhaps we should test them. The challenge. The testing arena materialized around Marcus in a shimmer of hard-light technology. 3 days of challenges awaited him, impossible standards designed to prove human inferiority once and for all. We'll begin with cognitive trials, Thessa announced, her tone clinically dismissive. She gestured, and holographic puzzles bloomed in the air. Mathematical equations that shifted dimensions, linguistic codes from 17 dead civilizations, strategic simulations that had stumped military minds for generations. Marcus rolled his shoulders and began. The first day dissolved into concentrated effort. What the Viridians didn't know was that Marcus hadn't been chosen for his diplomatic charm. He'd been chosen because his military record showed an uncanny ability to adapt, to find patterns where others saw chaos. His childhood on Europa Station, translating between dozens of human colonies, had trained his mind for exactly this kind of flexibility. By evening, Thessa's expression had shifted from smugness to confusion. He'd solved 70% of her challenges. The second day brought physical trials. Sarah designed an obstacle course that would test stamina, reflexes, and pain tolerance. Marcus knew he couldn't match their natural advantages. Viridian physiology was simply superior in raw metrics. So he didn't try to. Instead, he used efficiency. Leverage instead of strength. Momentum instead of speed. He'd spent years in variable gravity environments. His body knew how to adapt, how to make every movement count. Sarah watched him complete the course, not with the fastest time, but without a single wasted motion. Something flickered in her eyes. Respect. He fights smart, she murmured to Lioness. Like someone who's had to. The third day brought Kestra's diplomatic simulation, a negotiation scenario with 17 conflicting parties, each with hidden agendas. It was designed to be unsolvable. Marcus listened for 3 hours straight, barely speaking. Then he identified the one thing all parties needed but none had articulated. The simulation resolved peacefully. Kestra's icy composure cracked into genuine surprise. The revelation. The evening after the challenges, Marcus stood on the observation deck, staring at Earth's distant star. He'd passed their tests, but the victory felt hollow. Respect earned through proving yourself to people who'd already judged you. Was that really respect at all? You're angry. He turned to find Myra approaching, her expression softer than her sister's. The youngest sovereign rarely spoke in official proceedings, but her eyes had tracked him throughout the trials with something like curiosity. I'm tired, Marcus admitted. Tired of being measured against impossible standards just to be considered barely adequate. Myra stepped beside him, gazing out at the stars. My sisters, they've led our empire for 2 centuries. They've seen species rise and fall. Some became threats. Others became victims. They learned to assess quickly, to trust slowly. And to dismiss entirely, Marcus added quietly. Yes. She didn't deny it. But you surprised them. Surprised all of us. Because I'm not what you expected a human to be. Because you showed us what we've forgotten. Myra turned to face him. Adaptability isn't weakness. Limited lifespan doesn't mean limited wisdom. Physical fragility can breed innovation. She paused. We've become so confident in our strengths that we've stopped growing. Marcus saw the intelligence in her eyes, not the cold calculation of Thessa, but genuine insight. You knew I'd succeed, didn't you? A slight smile. I hoped. Our empire needs allies who think differently, who see solutions we've become blind to. Her expression grew serious. But Marcus, the challenges aren't over. There are factions in the Concord who see Earth as a threat precisely because of what you've proven. Before he could respond, an explosion rocked the station. Alarms screamed. Myra stumbled, and Marcus caught her instinctively, his combat training kicking in. Through the viewport, he saw fire blossoming from the diplomatic wing. The council chamber, Myra gasped. My sisters. They ran. The turning point. Smoke choked the corridors as Marcus and Myra raced toward the council chamber. Security forces rushed past them in the opposite direction, shouting in a dozen languages. Through the chaos, Marcus's tactical mind catalogued exits, structural damage, potential threats. The chamber doors had been blown inward. Inside, Lioness stood over Sarah's fallen form while Thessa and Kestra held off 3 armored attackers with energy shields flickering around their hands. Marcus didn't hesitate. He'd analyzed Viridian combat techniques during the trials, understood their reliance on energy projection and telepathic coordination. The attackers wore psi dampeners. They'd planned for Viridian abilities. They hadn't planned for human improvisation. Marcus grabbed a piece of twisted metal from the doorframe and hurled it at the nearest attacker's knee joint, the one weak point in their armor design. The figure crumpled. Before the others could react, he'd tackled the second, using the attacker's own momentum to slam them into the wall. The third attacker lunged at Lioness. Marcus intercepted, taking a glancing energy blast to his shoulder that sent white-hot pain through his nerves. But he'd bought enough time. Thessa's shield expanded, trapping the attacker in a stasis field. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing and the crackle of damaged systems. Lioness stared at Marcus, her violet eyes wide. He'd positioned himself between her and the threat without thought, despite everything. Despite the mockery, the challenges, the contempt. Why? She asked, the word barely a whisper. Marcus knelt beside Sarah, checking her pulse. Steady. Just stunned. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply. Isn't that reason enough? Later, in the medical bay, the 5 sisters gathered around Sarah's recovery bed. Marcus had refused treatment until the attackers were secured and their conspiracy traced, a radical faction that feared Earth's admission would shift the balance of power in the Concord. Kestra approached him, her Ice Queen facade completely gone. You saved my sister's life. Our lives. I did my job. No. Lioness stepped forward, and for the first time, Marcus saw vulnerability in her expression. You did far more than that. We judged you before we knew you. Dismissed your entire species based on prejudice and pride. She took a breath. We were wrong. Thessa nodded. Your species' brief lifespan has made you value each moment more intensely. You've learned to innovate because you had to. You fight with intelligence because you couldn't rely solely on strength. You saw us not as enemies or inferiors, Myra added softly, but as people worth protecting. Sarah, now conscious, managed a weak smile. You fight dirty. I respect that. Marcus felt something shift in the room, attention releasing, walls coming down. These weren't just powerful alien rulers anymore. They were individuals who'd made a mistake and had the strength to acknowledge it. Earth's application, Lina said formally, though her voice carried warmth now. I intend to champion it personally before the Concord, along with a formal alliance between our worlds. And, Kestra added with a genuine smile, perhaps you could stay on as ambassador? We have much to learn from each other. The alliance. 6 months later, Marcus stood once again in the Galactic Concord's Grand Chamber. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a full Earth delegation, and beside him, the 5 sovereign sisters of the Viridian Empire. The chamber that had once echoed with mockery now hummed with respectful attention. We come before the Concord, Lina announced, her voice carrying to every corner, to formally acknowledge our errors and celebrate our growth. We judged humanity harshly, assuming that difference meant inferiority. Captain Marcus Reed showed us the poverty of that thinking, not through boasts or demands, but through action, integrity, and courage. Sarah stepped forward. Human military strategy has already enhanced our defensive capabilities. Their ability to adapt rapidly to changing circumstances offers tactical advantages we'd overlooked for centuries. Thessa continued, their scientific community, unencumbered by our traditional methods, has proposed 17 novel solutions to problems we'd considered unsolvable. Fresh perspective is invaluable. Kestra smiled. And their diplomacy, rooted in empathy rather than telepathy, has opened dialogues with species we'd failed to reach for generations. Myra concluded, they've reminded us that strength comes in many forms. That a shorter lifespan can mean greater urgency to make each moment count. That being underestimated can be its own advantage. Marcus felt a swell of pride, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. For every explorer who'd ventured into the unknown, every scientist who'd pushed boundaries, every person who'd refused to accept limitations. Lina turned to him, extending her hand in the human custom she'd learned. Ambassador Reed, on behalf of the Viridian Empire, we formally request a permanent alliance with Earth. Not as superior to inferior, but as equals. Partners. Friends. Marcus took her hand, feeling the warmth of genuine connection. Around them, the Concord erupted in a cacophony of alien approval. Chimes, harmonics, percussive rhythms from 100 worlds. Later, at the celebration, Myra found him on the observation deck again, their regular meeting place now. You changed everything, she said softly. Not just for Earth, but for us. We'd become stagnant, convinced of our own superiority. You reminded us that there's always more to learn, more ways to grow. Marcus gazed at Earth Star, now surrounded by treaty markers and diplomatic beacons. I just did what anyone would do. No, Myra corrected gently. You did what the best of humanity does. You saw past prejudice to possibility. You chose compassion over resentment. You proved that being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you believe it yourself. As ships from Earth began arriving, carrying diplomats, scientists, artists, and dreamers, Marcus realized the truth. The greatest victories aren't won through force or superiority. They're won through understanding, patience, and the courage to remain true to your values even when facing contempt. The 5 sovereign sisters who had once mocked Earth's weak representative now stood as humanity's greatest advocates in the Concord. And Marcus Reed, the quiet captain who'd never sought glory, had become the bridge between worlds. Proof that sometimes the most profound changes begin with a single person refusing to accept prejudice as truth. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. Together, they would reach them all. End.